Today we're joined by Katy Gooblar and Greg Freeman from the Data Literacy Academy, an organisation working to solve data literacy challenges across industry. Since Greg founded in 2022, the Academy has been on a mission to help people and businesses become more confident and capable with data.
In order to get to the value of skill or usage, you have to go like mindset and confidence first. So I think to us, data literacy it's a mindset, it's a set of behaviours.
Their programmes focus on more than just technical skills, helping people develop the right mindset and confidence to feel comfortable working with data every day. We dive into how the Academy helps businesses connect their data efforts to real goals and measure success in ways that go beyond adoption numbers, showing real impact on the business.
And what we want to see is, okay, so what have you attempted? What do things look like? How are you measuring that technology adoption today? And then having that subset of people that are going through a programme or on a journey with us, and then measuring their difference afterwards and what that looks like compared to the rest of the sample or rest of the organisation, and demonstrating that real impact and difference.
This is such a great conversation, and real kudos to Greg, Katy and the wider team at Data Literacy Academy, because they are making such a difference in the space. Enjoy! Greg, Katy, let's talk data. So I just want to tell you about a conversation I've had with a CDO recently who was trying to implement data strategy. And some of the board and other members of the company found that, they thought that a data literacy to implement that would be distracting to the team. Oh, shock horror. So without swear words, how do you feel about that? And can you imagine why they'd say that? Or do you think it's totally ridiculous?
I mean, I think it's like any initiative, right? There's always going to be detractors and people who want to raise questions about, well, I've got a lot of reactive work to do, or my team are very operational, how are they going to find the time? But I mean, ultimately, I think to the point that I'd always make around that type of question from the board is, our job isn't to sell the value of data, right? So like, I think we have to enter an environment where data is an understood value asset. As long as you've got that, there shouldn't be that many questions about whether having more people who understand it, want to work with it, want to use it in the decision making is even a question, really. Because like, the more people that are data literate, the more value you will extract from data as a value piece, as an asset. So I get why that question comes. I don't necessarily agree with it, because it's obviously just like anything else. The business doesn't move forward if you don't run initiatives. But I get it.
I think it's pretty much misunderstood as well about what it actually means, because a lot of the time you're talking to people who have been in their role and have become really familiar with data over a long period of time. So they're quite often disconnected from what sometimes the operational teams are needed and wanting to achieve. And I think when we talk about the challenges of educating people and helping them understand and become confident, I think that group is equally as important to take them on a journey to data literacy as well.
Yeah, definitely. So not distracting. The opposite of that.
Not distracting, yeah. I think
empowering, maybe.
Yeah, empowering, enabling rather than distracting.
Yes.
I think it's a sequence though. Mm-hmm. So I think they might see it as a distraction if they don't fully understand that journey and what it means. And I think by engaging them as a group to really understand what impact it can have and the value that will add, just enhancing and enabling them to do and achieve their business strategy, or enabling them to do more of what they are intending to do rather than it being an extra piece to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
That takes that away.
So in data, we do love buzzwords, and some would argue that maybe even data literacy is a buzzword, to the point that we all know what it means to be literate or illiterate. But what does it actually mean to be data literate?
Yeah, I think this is something that we do talk about a lot. Like, what does data literacy mean to us? What does data literacy mean to the industry? And we have a fairly strong opinion that it's misunderstood at the moment. The Gartner definition, and we're never ones to question Gartner, because they are a fairly important power in the world of analysis and kind of concept building within the industry. But I think a lot of the focus is on the skills side of data. Actually, a lot of the data literacy work we do is about enabling mindset and confidence, like Katy says. And in order to get to the value of skill or usage, you have to go like mindset and confidence first. So I think to us, data literacy is a it's a mindset, it's a set of behaviours that you enable amongst your people beyond the data office, because it's really easy to enable data literacy in the data office, you'd hope. But yeah, it's how do you enable the rest of the organisation to feel comfortable, feel like they want to be part of your world as a data office. Is it a buzzword? Probably not, in my opinion. I think there's loads of buzzwords in data, but I kind of disagree that literacy and culture is a buzzword. I think it's as significant of a core strategic pillar within data success as technology is.
The reality, though, as well, is that it's sometimes taken as a buzzword in data circles, but actually when you start to talk to people, it's not as big a problem as it comes across in some of the echo chamber conversations that we tend to have. And I think it's often blown out of proportion, right? With when you're talking to people about taking them on an educational pathway or enabling them to feel differently or do things differently, that word doesn't really matter. It says it does what it says on the tin, really, do you know? So
I do think that's how we create barriers in data, though, don't we? Because through buzzwords and all this jargon that, in the data space, we know what it means, but those outside of it are like, excuse me? And that is building a barrier, and you're trying to break that barrier down fundamentally. So what does good look like in an organisation to achieve data literacy, would you say?
An appreciation that it's more than just skills, I think is the key. We see data literacy as a very clear problem, actually. So I must say this a million times a week. But the problem that we see with data and data literacy is that right now there are still two types of people within most, if not all, businesses. You've got business people who are really, really good at what they do for a living. So they're really good at sales or marketing or procurement or manufacturing or engineering, whatever it might be. But fundamentally, they don't see the value in data. Like, they don't understand how to use it in their decision making. They probably don't have baseline confidence in it, and therefore they're unwilling to deliver value from it, which causes a bit of an issue for the data office. In our mind, though, there's as much of a problem on the data side of things, where you've got a load of people who, by nature of their role, much better at data, much more technical, much more competent in that world. Have they got all the business acumen or the commercial acumen they need? Probably not. Do they always have the best soft skills, the best communication skills, storytelling skills? Not always. A lot of the time they've chosen data because it was quite technical and quite engineering-y. And therefore we see a two-sided knowledge gap and a two-sided communication gap. And all of our programs are designed to close those two gaps. So when I think about some of our most successful flagship programs like Aston Uni, which I think is a really good example, and we recently did a webinar of our own with Helen Blakey, the CDO there. What's a really kind of like magical thing about getting a program in data literacy and culture right is that gap closes from both sides. And in my opinion, the best data cultures we see are the ones where that two-sided knowledge gap and that two-sided communication gap are as small as they possibly can be. And you don't just do that through skills training. There's a big change management, engagement, winning hearts and minds piece first to build the relationships and build the trust, and then you buy the right to educate people. So I think that's what a good program looks like.
And I think to flip the other side of that, what good looks like is when you get the feedback from individuals about the difference you've made to them, so that they go into it and feel the pain of being scared about how they're going to be judged or performance managed, or they don't really understand how data is going to be used against their performance or their work, or how they can use it in their day job to make a difference. And then they come out of an education program and they go, I actually feel more confident. I feel more able to use information. I'm not fearful of how it's going to be used, because I can question it, I can challenge it, I can come with my own evidence or my own data to counterbalance that. And just seeing that switch in people is really what good looks like for the education side.
And how is that measured? Because I suppose those investing in it, ultimately what they want is ROI. You know, they do want to achieve change, and change can be hard to measure. But fundamentally, what tangibles can companies expect if they go through these programs?
I think it's multifaceted, because there's lots of standard measures. You know, there's lots of things about how people have reacted and their feeling around it. So how you would have like NPS scoring against the real engagement of the programs and how people have either turned up and what they've learned, but that doesn't really measure success. You know, that is bums on seats, or that's a way that we can say tangible numeric measures. But then what we want to look at is that longer term tail of it. So it's like, what were we trying to achieve? Why did we engage, or why did a business engage with us in the first place? What was the real success measure for them? And then seeing a baseline before, going through the change management, the education, all the wraparound that we offer as part of that, and changing mindsets, increasing skills and knowledge, and then seeing a difference at the other end. So quite a lot of what we do is about transformation and adoption of new tools, technologies, working differently, culture, practices, and where it's failed in the past before. And then what we want to see is, well, okay, so what have you attempted? What do things look like? How are you measuring that technology adoption today? And then having that subset of people that are going through a programme or on a journey with us, and then measuring their difference afterwards and what that looks like compared to the rest of the sample or rest of the organisation, and demonstrating that real impact and difference.
Yeah, I think like for me, big ones like technology adoption. I mean, the value of rolling out a data product is for it to be used. Ultimately, if you've got a £10 million technology program with a new fancy data warehouse, you've built a cloud infrastructure, you've rolled out Power BI or Tableau or whatever it might be, and nobody's using it, then that isn't valuable. And those are very trackable things. I mean, most organizations have a clear picture of whether people are logging into Power BI, using Power BI, self-serving, building. So that can be one thing that, like, if the accepted value of rolling out data products and data technologies is there, then the adoption of those is a clear and obvious one. I think my favourite, though, and this again to reference Gartner, is definitely becoming more prevalent within Gartner's thinking. The more data literate the organisation becomes, the more data literate individuals you have, the more use cases you will derive. And I mean, we work in environments where some of the large consultancies have been in there trying to derive use cases from the business at huge sums of money, basically. There's a lot of money spent on bringing people in to go and find use cases across the business. Actually, that happens fairly organically the more data literate an organisation gets, and you can set a clear ROI from that use case that came from that person becoming more data literate, and that becomes your measurability. Like, you've got pounds, pence, dollars and cents that you can say, because those people became more data literate, we've been able to identify that problem, we've been able to solve that problem, and that would never have happened without the programme. So I think that's the most impactful way to make it a numerate money-based figure.
Do you know, you were saying before about what does success look like? And I think we've got some great examples where you tie that back to a moment in a question that you ask while you've got an activity going on or a breakout room going on, and you've given them some knowledge that's unlocked an opportunity for them to think differently. And then they bring that to a class and they say, actually, I've just been thinking about this problem that's existed for ages. I didn't think of it a data problem before. But actually, if I can gather some information about this and I can do that differently and I can speak to that person, and then all of a sudden it snowballs, and it's not about necessarily our success of doing that, but it's about unlocking that mind to be able to do it. And these are people that are often working in the depths at the front line or operationally, where change can actually happen and have lasting impact. And we see that so regularly and, like you say, so organically.
Yeah, so it's that light bulb moment that you see go off in people. And I suppose on that, Greg, as the founder of the business, when did you identify a gap for this and need to create a business around it?
Yeah, so I don't think it's much of a secret, actually. My background is largely commercial. I'm not a data professional in inverted commas by trade. And I think two things happened in my career. So firstly, I worked in businesses that were fairly data literate by nature, so they had a lot of data professionals in them, and the expectation was, as a commercial leader, you were part of that journey, and I'm not sure I was at that point. And I think the thing that I noticed was that exceptionally data literate people or data fluent people, data professionals, often struggled to go back to the level I needed them to in order to take me on the journey. So that was kind of a first identifier that there's a gap for people who are not so in the weeds of data to help people who are also not so in the weeds of data go on that journey. The other thing was that worked in kind of like data infrastructure type businesses, and we do really good work. And I think it's like we were a third party vendor implementing data infrastructure, data architecture, but I think it's a similar vibe you get with in-house data teams. They do really good work. They build good foundational platforms. They build good data products. And we would get this feedback that X wasn't valuable because we don't know how to use it, or X wasn't valuable because we just haven't been able to make a decision with that information. And that isn't really as a result of the technology. That's as a result of the people on the far end of it not being able to actually create value from it. So about that time, Gartner, again, really upped the value of data literacy within the enablement of a CDO's world, and how important data literacy and culture is going to be for the success of CDOs and CIOs in data. And it was just, I thought it was too good of an opportunity to miss. I mean, my degree's in education, so I've always had a passion for education. I thought I wanted to be a teacher for most of my life growing up. My mum is a teacher, and the combination of commerciality, commercial lens, education, data value, the whole piece just came together, and it made sense to found the business. And hopefully with the success we've had with clients as big as 100,000 people down to much smaller organizations, it shows that we've seen a gap, we've worked out how to deliver against it and make it valuable for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Katy, you come from a different background, because as a head of data, and you've probably no doubt implemented or tried to implement data literacy through data strategy. So what experiences led you to thrive in this environment, would you say?
I think the biggest piece for me was that I always had a passion as a sideline to my permanent roles in education as well. So that sort of draws together. You know, I was lecturing at Leeds Beckett University on taking social science students through to the importance and value of data and how they could have a career in that field, sort of as a voluntary piece on the side. But I never got the opportunity in my full-time jobs to spend as much time as I wanted to with those who weren't within the data space. That there was always too many burning platforms to get my hands on, or to so many things to fix or implement, or change. It's a standard story that it always falls down the pecking order, does the rest of the organisation, but that's where I wanted to spend lots of my time. And last time we spoke, I was at the RCN and I was talking about the programmes of interviewing, enabling nurses across the business to feel like they were data people, even when they definitely are, but they didn't recognise that in themselves. And then I joined Data Literacy Academy as an educator. I just wanted to be more involved in that. And then Greg and I were talking about opportunities for growth and scale. And it was just a match-up of skill sets from knowledge and industry experience through the education, and then into the development of our curriculum and our pathways for future curriculums as well.
And how has the business changed just in the short 2 years that when you started, would you say?
Has changed.
It's changed a lot. I mean, like, we've gone from really just me on my own to there's like north of 80 people involved now. So it's just the scale has changed, the headache have changed. Like, you go from one headache to the next headache, and it's fun though. I mean, I always dreamed of being in a business that scaled as fast as we're scaling. I think the main one is just the size of problem we're solving now. I think I didn't know it at the time, but we're not just a training business, and I definitely don't want us to be a training business, because it's a much bigger problem than just being a training business. Early on, we would train whoever wanted to learn data, and I think that's fine, because that was a learning experience for us. But now we're just so much more in terms of like the amount of services we offer, the amount of change program building we do with people,
professionals and expertise we've got in house now through our SMEs. It's just been exponential, and therefore it's all changed very, very rapidly. But I think the thing I'm really proud of is that even early doors, we got really good feedback on the learning experience, and people who were really proud to have our credentials on their CV, and I don't think that's changed. I think the beauty of it is we've got even better at education that we were already good at, whilst surrounding ourselves with change management, internal comms, L&D professionals, all those things. So I think that's probably the bit I'm proud of from a consistency perspective.
Yeah, it's amazing. And for you as an individual, because obviously it's your baby in the sense that one-man band at the start, and then you've got different ideas, different personalities. And one thing someone taught me was you're always going to disagree, but you've got to learn to disagree well with someone, because ultimately it's going to come up. And, diverse perspectives are key for growth and success. success. So how have you found that journey and I suppose your relationship? Because quite different backgrounds and possibly ways of thinking as well.
Yeah, I mean, disagree and commit has to be a thing, right? I think, I guess one thing that I say, but you can only take your own lens on it, I guess. But hopefully I'm not the kind of person that isn't open to some sort of feedback and input and that type of thing.
Is this true, Katy?
Don't get me wrong. I like whatever. If I've got a concept I'm very sure of from like a market position or a product market fit piece, I tend to stick to it. But honestly, I'm just not very good at a lot of things. Like, I'm not very good at organizing. I'm not very good at creativity. I'm just not very good at those things. And
it's frustratingly right a lot of the time, which is really annoying. Because when we look at problems and problem solving together, I think I will look big picture and funnel down to the detail. Greg often starts at the detail and then broadens about what does that look like bigger. And often we're talking about the same thing, but from very different angles. And I think meeting in that middle and how we work that out has been really important.
Yeah,
and with the rest of the team, we've got a very diverse, very different group, especially on the exec board, but across the whole business. And I think that's really important to getting stuff done. And I think that's what's key to everything is, will it add value? Does it aid our business direction? And can we just get it done?
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, I'd say what we are obsessed with as a business, like the mutual obsession amongst all the key people is on productization and scalability. And as long as you're approaching that from all the different required angles, like my lens and Ben's lens is obviously fairly commercial on that side of things. Danny and Katy from a process education perspective is like much more applied. As long as you've got the right level of balance within your obsession, I think you'll continue to do well, and that is actually what's allowed us to scale as fast as we have, because we've obsessed over productization, repeatability, success of the model, and honing the success of the model. And that's why it doesn't matter whether we go into an organization that's brilliantly complex, and some of our clients are fascinatingly complex, and I'm like just a business geek. So I'm not a data geek, I'm definitely a business geek, and I obsessively love some of our clients because they're so complicated. But whether you go into that environment or a much simpler environment, the model works, is repeatable, is scalable, and is award-winning, and that kind of is what allows us to be successful, I think.
Yeah, amazing.
What makes it really impactful as well is it's not just about us internally and how we work together. Very much what we do is spend a lot of time with those clients and listen to their problems that they're trying to solve and let them influence where there's necessary change in our ways of working as well. So having those reflections on, actually, even if we have been delivering a really successful programme, is it time for pivoting or changing to meet a different need that many businesses will be experiencing because the nature of the work changes, and just being really open to listening to that and enabling them to get involved in that, but knowing where we sit as well and knowing where our swim lane is and directing that, I think is quite a different approach.
100%. And I think that like really good example of that right now, actually, we're just, we've become very aware that in order to make data literacy and culture live and breathe longer term, communities of practice outside of the data and analytics team are incredibly important. So like businesses are great at getting their analytics team to be a community practice or their data engineers to be a community practice. Actually, the one that really moves the needle and creates the feedback loops you need is the one that brings the people from outside of the data analytics and the IT team into this world. And gets them excited and gives them somewhere that they can keep coming back to, and it makes it not a drop in the ocean type thing, not a sheep dip thing. And we've just basically released that as a product, because actually having the bandwidth to do communities at scale is a really hard thing. Yet to deliver the value of what we do and embed the value of what we do, businesses have to be able to do it. So the reaction is to come up with a way to make that a really effective product at scale. And again, excited for that one, because I think it'll just enhance the value of what we do, but as a reaction to the market, like what Katy said.
Yeah, so you're taking people on a journey. So from day one, are there hesitations like, I'm not good at maths, I don't like numbers, I don't have a STEM background? Are these the kind of things you hear?
100%.
And what do you say then to them?
I think it's a series of different things, and we talk a lot about sort of change management, and Greg's referenced it a few times, because we're working with adults. It's easy when you start to talk about sort of the teaching of children where they've got no concept of everything's new and exciting. So you're building from scratch. But when you're working with adults, there's a lot of history there. There's a lot of fear from school. There's a lot of built up bad practice or knowledge or a bad experience in workplaces. And what we've got to spend the time doing is recognising that and then unpicking it and enabling us to really understand the challenges that they're facing and why, and doing that in a safe space. That means that you don't put somebody into a programme with us from day one and then expect them to go through, all of this new language, all of these new expectations, when they're probably, most people haven't been in an education setting for a long, long time. So it's about really starting from that basic perspective of unlocking that confidence and mindset and acknowledgement of it's going to be a journey. This is the starting point, but it doesn't start with the education. It very much starts with the change management process and much before then, doesn't it?
100%. And I mean, fundamentally and scientifically, the adult brain is just not as ready to learn and develop as a growing brain, right? Like that's, so you've got to be patient with that. I think what we see as a real, I'll call it a gotcha, but it's more of a repeated mistake we see across internal programs, is this expectation that people will want this. And actually there's two dangers with that. So the first is that you kind of go and you just expect it, and therefore you think you can roll out some self-service learning on LinkedIn Learning and it'll fix all your problems. That's not going to happen. That's a pretty poor solution to the problem. And I think the other one then is that you've just got a load of people who will put their hand up, and that's fine because you want appetite. There's no doubt you want appetite. But if 15% of the business want to learn and the other 80% don't, and then you've got your 5% of data professionals, if all you do is go after people who've got appetite, you've probably only satisfied the data professionals and the like hands up people, and that leaves you with a massive silent majority that you're not engaging. So I think the assumption that this is wanted is a big danger. Actually appreciating that there's a lot of people and there's massive bodies of research way beyond what we've got the bandwidth and scope to do that suggest it is north of 80% of the business. You've got to go and get them too, because if you just stick with that data professional high appetite outside the data team community, you're going to widen that gap I talked about earlier. That gap just gets bigger and you leave more and more people behind. And I think the industry at the moment is obsessed with data quality, and not for any negative reason. I think it's a significant problem within data. There's no doubt about it. Most of data quality issues are created by that 80%. They're created by the people that just don't care about data right now. So if you just ignore them and pretend they're not there, you're going to lose on the things that you care about. And data quality is definitely one of those things that people care about. And
they don't know what they don't know. So if you say to somebody and you put it out there like, oh, we want you to be more data literate, or we want you to use data differently. And they say, oh, well, I have this spreadsheet of my own that I use here, or I've got, this person gives me this information. I don't need anything else, because you're asking them to imagine a world or a situation that they have absolutely no context in. And I think that's part of or fear. It's only ever been used in a negative concept. So it's only ever been used to evidence bad behaviour or poor performance or a situation that hasn't been super positive. And I think what I get really excited about is the opportunity that it can bring and the difference it can make. And I think when you start to engage people on that one-to-one, they start to see that actually I don't have to fear this. There are things that are really exciting about this, that we can, what if this happens, and what if that happens, what will look different, and what do I want to learn that I can use not just in my work but in my home life, or that I can work with my kids and grandkids about and have conversations about their world. And it's that step by step getting excited about it.
Yeah, it makes sense. And we've established you don't need to be technical, you don't need to be able to code, but what soft skills are you looking for, or what soft skills do thrive in a data literate environment, would you say?
Would you mean after or before?
I suppose if you want to encourage someone to be curious
or
creative. So skills that maybe you're unlocking in people that they might not know they have.
I think it's all of those things. I think it's as as the world is changing around us in that digital and AI space, it's very, very much about having the ability to challenge and think critically about information you're being presented to. Do you understand the sources of it, where it's come from? Do you trust it? Are you able to then use it to make effective decisions, especially because there is so much out there? So I think there's definitely the critical thinking piece about problem solving, that curiosity, that ability to really think differently and think deeply about what is being presented to you around you.
For me, if I could give people one mindset around data, and this might be a little bit further down the line once they understand that it could be valuable, and I talk about this fairly often, it's a concept of like an intervention mindset. So much data work is wasted and is boring and is just like backwards looking. Ultimately, as a business, we have to make some really critical decisions about how we invest in data and how we invest time and money in actually doing our own data work. And we do so little backwards looking stuff, because actually when you've not got 100 people in your data office, you can't really spend much time doing that type of work. In our business, if it's not got a clear intervention that could come off the back of it, so there's not a hypothesis and we're testing against the hypothesis so we can make a change, or we can see clearly that if we do this with this bracket of learners, it'll create change, positive impact. We just don't do it. And I think the purpose of data is to create interventions that you can trust. It's not data for the sake of data. So that intervention mindset's probably the big one that I'd love to see more people adopt and adapt to.
Okay, and leading on from that, as data leaders or leaders in general, I think there is an element of data fatigue or like change fatigue. It happens. So what would you encourage leaders to focus on to try and just not get distracted by all the noise?
Right, so I think this is the biggest win with data literacy and culture, if I'm honest. Like, if I was to tell a data leader why they should do data literacy, I think it's because it's the one bit of data people might not be that sick of and that bored of hearing that it's going to change the world. It's the first time we see this loads, and Katy talks really well about like this halo effect that she can talk about in a second, but it's the one time where people will feel, as leaders or even as just people in the business who've heard that data is going to be the silver bullet or AI is going to be the silver bullet, whatever it might be, that they will feel like the data office and the IT office, whatever bracket you fit into, has come to them and kind of like made them part of it. So actually, the big win is that it creates a relationship with data in the organisation that's positive. And I'll let Katy talk about the halo effect, because that's the summarisation of it.
Yeah, I think there's, as part of that halo effect, it's an explanation in a minute. I think it's even the language around data. Do you know, when we're talking about a lot of this, that fictitious sort of exclusionary data team that sits somewhere that these people have never met, that's built up about all of these things that are happening behind the scenes, can be quite negative. And if the first time that somebody's engaged with a data team or a request for data and they haven't quite understood what it is that they're asking for, and the response that they get is, you haven't filled in this form right, or I'll give you something and then you say that's not quite what I wanted, and they go, well, what did you want? That's what you asked for, which is really, really common. Then that's that lasting impact that person takes away, and they might not ever come back to have that conversation with the data team again, or the form is too difficult, and therefore it almost creates a barrier from day one. And just the language that we use around, like you said, the buzzwords become quite like inclusive, that if you don't understand what that means, are you going to put your hand up and say, I don't quite understand what that means? So all of those things come together to create this view of having an influence over people. So the halo effect very much is about what is that lasting impression or that first impression that you take from, and that can be good. It can be like, I see it positively and everybody is lovely in that team, and therefore it translates to my first impression is that's great. That's not always the case. So if that first impression is quite negative or quite daunting or quite that the response isn't a great one, then it's almost like a negative halo effect. It's the reverse of that somebody goes, do you know what, everybody in that team is not nice, or everybody in that team talks a language I don't understand, and that's what you take away from it. To go back to the first part of your question, I think the focus then has to be about not making it tiring. So making it about the work that they do or something that they're quite passionate about. And if you feel passionate about your work, or if you feel excited about the work that you've chosen to do, data's the enabler. And it's the piece that gets you further. And I think when we talk about data literacy, it's not about the data, it's about the end game or the goal that you're trying to achieve. And that doesn't get tiring if you're in a role that you really like or you're doing work that you're enjoying. Data is that enhancement, and it's that next level.
Yeah, makes sense. So you mentioned that you help small, medium-sized, larger businesses. I imagine at enterprise level.
I guess for clarity, yeah, like really it's 1,000 heads plus. Like
right, 1,000 head plus.
We do some work with businesses below that if there's a particular reason, like we like the CDO sometimes, or like that gives us some traction there. But no, typically it would be considered like upper mid-market to enterprise. That is our entire audience, really.
And what stage of data strategy are they at? Would you say they're in the infancy or mature or a little bit in the middle or the whole realm?
It's the $1 million question, right? Like when do you get the people involved? And I think my takeaway at this point is it's never too soon. And it sounds like obviously I'm going to have a massive amount of bias towards that, but I think some of the better programs we see are where literacy and culture is given the same importance as the other two, or what is becoming 3 pillars. So if you think about a data strategy as technology, which is the absolute given because everyone likes spending money on tangible things, and there's a lot of vendors who are very highly funded to tell you that that's the most important bit. Process and operational work. AI obviously is becoming a very core piece of a strategy now. And then the people bit. Most people, if they looked dead in the mirror at themselves and decided to think about their budgets, would find that they have spent anywhere from 10x to 100x on the other bits. Like you put a decent cloud infrastructure in place and bring all the contractors in to build it and all the big consultancies. You bring some big consultancies in to build it with you. You're going to be spending astronomical fees, right? That's just the truth of it. And if you don't bring the people on the journey at the same time, you will not enable the perceived and promised value from those things. So I think I love it when it's almost quite early in a strategy and it comes alongside the other bits. That said, we definitely pick up some programs where they've already spent all that money and they've been like, guys, we've spent loads of money and everyone's a bit upset with us because we've not derived any value from it. So how are we going to do that? Well, literacy and culture will help you rescue that. But yeah, I think there's no such thing as too early. Probably to the halo effect point, really, where it's like, if you want to win early and you want to find the high value use cases and people who are actually going to capitalize on it, you need people on the journey as early as possible. So why would you wait? But again, we get why people do.
The reality is, just to that last point, is why wait? Because if you're waiting for something, then that future never really comes, because there's always, when that future comes to you and it becomes present, there's always something else to be doing. And that your competitors are thinking about those other things right now. So why wait any further? Because you can make impact and you can make change now, even if you're thinking about a particular key strategic cohort, we call them, about really focusing in on who can add value today, who you can have quick wins with to deliver and derive change or investment or improvement. Then there's no point waiting for that to get worse or to get further down the line and then have to try and backtrack to make it better.
I was going to say, start as you mean to go on. And 100%. Also, we're talking about these barriers. The longer you wait, the higher the barrier is going to become, and 100%. You're going to have to knock it down. So
I tell you what, there's not many CDOs who set out their strategy to be rolled back into IT.
Yeah,
not thinking about the people and not bringing them on the journey and making yourself a technology function. That is a surefire way to get yourself rolled back into the technology function. Yeah. So, like, I think it has to be a different mindset now from the industry. There's loads of people who are obsessed with the value message now, like the commercial value of data message. It's been, like many of the messages in the industry, prevalent for a while. How many people actually do the things that need to be done to make that happen? Way less than it should be. So for me, it's just the time is now, always. And to Katie's point, a data literacy and culture program is not 10,000 people all at once anyway. You can find some really big impact by focusing on tens or low hundreds of people, as long as there's a clear strategic link to the higher level strategy of the business. If your CEO wants you to deliver a particular thing, I had a really interesting conversation the other day where they were like, the CEO cares loads about health and safety. That's the priority for the whole business, but therefore, as a result, the priority for data is driving health and safety. Well, you don't need to train 10,000 people in data to deliver value. Train your health and safety representatives and you'll make better data-driven decisions in it. So
compliance,
compliance, like whatever your business cares about, just go after that early, because that's what people at the top table care about, and that's how you're going to deliver value to them. So yeah, for me, it's a no time like the present.
Yeah, and I think that is interesting for listeners and those thinking of engaging with such a programme. What percentage of people, on average, do you put through the programme from every company? Yeah. I mean, I imagine it differs, but as a percentage.
Yeah, we can't really do it as a percentage, actually, because it's more the approach. I mean, we typically start with somewhere between 50 and 250 people, depending on the size of the organisation. We want them to be intrinsically linked to the corporate strategy where possible. We spend a lot of our time focusing on that and making sure that we know that it's going to represent value to people outside of the data office. I mean, I say an awful lot. I don't really care what the CDO wants. I care an awful lot about what the CEO or the CFO or the COO wants, because that's going to enable the CDO to be more successful, and we see that all the time. So yeah, for me, and don't get me wrong, like places like Bentley, where we've been in since almost the start of the business, we roll up hundreds of people a month at times and stuff. It's not about staying with that small of a number, but getting started with that small of a number and making it work and showing that it works, and showing, to your point earlier, Emma, that it delivers value and ROI. Do it early, do it right, and just get in there with value. Then we can scale and grow.
We tend to see as well what that follows on to offer as well, because once you start with a flagship program like Data for Business or a starting point, that creates you a funnel into some of the other more challenging to fill skill sets, like when we're talking about data governance and data stewardship. Businesses really often struggle to get people engaged and excited about some of those subjects, but actually when you start from afresh and you're starting with that introductory level, you can start to see the people who are getting it and really want to do something more, and that creates you a bit of a pipeline to either your data office or into your stewardship or into those communities that we start to talk about. So it isn't just a percentage of that first hit stuff, it's about what's the longevity of this, how do these people grow within your business to then become your pipeline, your enthusiasts, your people that want to take you as a business further, that are already out usually in the business and have great ideas on how they can get more involved in operational improvement or business development, and you've just given them the keys to think differently, and then their opportunity grows as well. So there's a lot of that happens.
Yeah, and you are right to engage the CEO, the CFO, the COO, anyone but the CDO, because he's already engaged or she's already engaged. But in terms of, there is a lot of talk in the industry that data leaders are set up to fail because they haven't got that buy-in. And I've spoken to those who feel like the budget's already exhausted because the company went technology first, maybe even before they got there, and now they're like, there's no money, so just see what you can do. And some of these organisations are quite large and I imagine quite profitable. So is that something you see? And I suppose, Katy, you coming from a head of data position, you may have had that friction yourself already.
Yeah, and it comes back to having those early conversations about what is it that you're trying to achieve, because for as much as the data budget might be exhausted, we're talking about people, and often an L&D or a HR and a functional sort of CFO department are wanting to invest in their people. You know, there's a big skills gap, there's a knowledge shortage, there's businesses are really starting to recognise that they've got a workforce that is slightly behind that digital capability or that data functionality for the future. So it isn't just the one pot that we look at having conversations with the top table about. It's about what is it you're trying to achieve, and actually it's a people investment enabled and supported and delivered by the data department function, CDO, but actually it isn't just about them. It's about bringing in your HR directors, it's about bringing in L&D, it's about enabling who in the business are you trying to attract and achieve the change with, and actually getting all of those pieces together.
100%. Like we love like a transformation program budget or something like that. We do. I mean, it ultimately for the CDO gives them an opportunity to do some of the bits that they don't feel like they can do with their own budgets. I mean, to your question, why are you taking a role if there's no budget left? That's a definite. Like I'm not here to challenge that, but I mean, you're making a career decision. Ask the right questions, I guess. But also, I think if I rarely find commercially minded CDOs who can't access more budget from somewhere in their business. If they're asking the right questions, they're making the right types of promises. Don't get me wrong, some tech-led CDOs do struggle to get budget when all the tech hasn't worked, and that's definitely a thing. They're probably not going to work with us anyway, let's be honest. Like we definitely work with a certain type of CDO, I think, somebody like one that's open-minded to the fact that the value from data is out there in the business. It's not just in technology infrastructure and their team. So I think for me, we're really fortunate that we get to work with some CDOs who know how to access budget initially, and then they prove the value through our program and they can access way more. I think our program unlocks more budget. There's no doubt about it, because it gets senior people to buy into it. So
sometimes they're just looking for that additional support. So often what we have is a conversation where the CDO will have all of the ideas and all of the thought process there, but just actually need that additional support or the language or the engagement and the scale to be able to do that. And some of the conversations we have is Greg coming from that commercial perspective, me from an education, learning, development piece, and bringing those people together where they can actually ask some really challenging questions that the CDO may have been able to answer on their own, but didn't have all of these expertise and all of these subject matter experts behind them to really back it. And I think sometimes having that conversation in a room about what is it that's been a challenge for you, what's getting in the way of you adding success, but how are you going to deliver that differently? And that's the conversation we often have, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's, again, just a slightly unique lens on this problem space and this industry, is that, like, as a team, I'd say we're as comfortable sat down with a CEO, a CFO, or a CCO as we are with a CDO. Like, don't get me wrong, most of our network is CDOs, but actually, I absolutely love having commercial conversations. Like, they're my favorite type of conversation. Like, I just love talking about how people can enable better business to happen. So I think people are typically very comfortable putting us in front of their senior leadership team. And one thing that we have done through our programs every single time is elevated ourselves into the C-suite and kind of developed that relationship between the CDO and the C-suite, because it is the people side of it, and therefore it's a people and commercial conversation as much as it is a data conversation. And again, if there's CDOs out there who are thinking, how do I do that, then literacy and culture is probably your golden ticket to that relationship, in my opinion.
In the future, do you think this is going to be as hot a topic with the new generation coming through who have lived a lot more digitally than perhaps the older generations? Like, have you seen that, or still is there a need to inform people to make better decisions through the use of data?
We still face a gap at the moment that is schools still aren't teaching this at the right level to then filter through the whole education system. It's getting there, but it's very, very new in those spaces. And when we work with some charities that are trying to make change in that space happen. But there is still that gap. And what we tend to see is, even though they are digitally literate and they can use technology and devices, the understanding and awareness of what's happening behind with the data, or how to challenge it and understand bias or understand fake news type conversations is still there. That it's just a lot. Their processes are a lot quicker. They flick through and have attention that's different to our ways of developing. People have to change to match that generation change, which is things we're talking about now. But there is still a gap, and there's still a gap between the formal education system and university output through to business. And because a lot of the businesses are still early in this journey, they don't have those programs from onboarding, they don't have it in their interviewing processes. So although I think that it is improving and it's a slightly different problem, I still think there's still a big gap in awareness, understanding, confidence about use of data in a business setting.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, I agree. Like, academic settings still do not teach people how to use data in a commercial setting. There's it's a clear and obvious gap. So for me, digital literacy is far more organic now. We definitely agree with that. And it's, in my opinion, it's part of the same kind of continuum in essence. Like, is it worth teaching data literacy to someone who's completely digitally illiterate? Probably not, because they've got to work out how to turn the device on before they can actually make the most of the data. But at the same time, just because someone can turn the device on and is very comfortable using whatever technology and digital technology they have access to, actually the curiosity, the kind of constructive questioning, like everything that is commerciality of data still is a core part of data literacy that doesn't come naturally. So
we work with a couple of clients as well that are digitally confident clients. They've been born out of a digital world, and their operations are very digital minded. And the work with them is really focused about enabling everybody to self-serve. So that's a very different mindset than a hub and spoke model, where you're asking a data office to be centralised and then having individuals or groups of individuals out in the business to generate that in a standard enterprise setting. In these other businesses, everybody comes with a baseline acceptance and understanding, but they all want to engage differently. They all want to be able to self-serve that information and make decisions quicker and more impactfully. So it's just a very different business model.
Yeah, okay. And talking about gaps, there's obviously inequities in different areas of education, health, policy surrounding data and access to data, and I suppose programmes around that. So I know that's something you're passionate about, Katy. So could you just elaborate, I suppose, because it's quite complicated, because it's growing and it's a societal thing, it's a cultural thing, it's maybe a political thing as well, but the gap is going to get bigger if we don't do anything about it.
Yeah, I think there's two sides to that conversation. There's the side that is about data and information to measure that gap and to understand it better, and to enable people to really recognise where they sit in that, and being able to, for businesses to report against some of the reporting standards and requirements, and understand how they fill some of those gaps and achieve that. And then the other side of it is still that literacy gap that is still about how do you empower and enable people to have the right skills and knowledge from those communities that are then disadvantaged. And how do we, because the reality is then in business, you want those people involved in that conversation because they understand how it impacts them and their community or their background. And that's still a big gap, because the way to bring people into that space is usually through an academic setting, or it's through exposure from role models, or and access to those people is really challenging if you're not from a background that has those role models in your community, or has those role models in your life generally. So I think that the two sides of that problem are very much entwined with making data and insight and information and the whole concept of it more accessible to those who don't fall into the standard pathway that people would get into that business, into STEM, into senior positions and have that role model. And then the other side is it is complicated data, and often it's impacted a lot by data quality issues and all of the stigma about providing information and how it's going to be used, and is it going to be used against me in the future, so why would I provide it in the first place? And companies being able to make accurate decisions or interventions, as Greg was saying, on information that they don't capture becomes really problematic. So I think it's a big problem to solve. There's a lot to do, but I think it starts with the people. I think it's about getting people with those experiences and different mindsets and the diversity of thought into the room, and with the skills, knowledge, confidence, to be able to have that conversation.
Yeah. And in an ideal world, would you like to see this part of the curriculum taught to children, I don't know, as young as 4?
Yeah, so I think we've spoken quite a lot about where does that mindset and influence come from? And I think there's a lot of data out there around that actually the way we talk about gender, for example, happens at sort of 6, 7. And unless you're capturing the opportunity for girls to be more involved in data and STEM subjects at that age, or different people from different communities being able to be involved at that age, you're already setting people up for a pathway that excludes them from all the way through their education or all the way through their experiences. So I'm really passionate about how you get that supported into schools, into the education programs, and not just traditional education. So I think there's a lot to say about sort of diversity in schools and how that's managed in the current structure of schooling and education. But I think how you do that in a already cash strapped, is that the right word? Yeah. Schooling system where there isn't the cash to spend on a new curriculum or to change things, and how you get big business and commercial businesses more involved in supporting the future and supporting minds in the future.
Yeah, I've actually probably been on my own journey of thinking on this space, and for a long time I was quite academically committed, and not actually personally that academically committed, but believed that a good academic profile and career was incredibly important. I think actually now the further into my professional career I get, we could screw a lot of the curriculum up and start again and make it just far more relevant and applied. I think the one that everyone goes after is personal finance and stuff, and yeah, you can probably learn that as you grow up, but teaching people younger would be useful. But the lack of application to what we actually do as professionals in our careers through the academic journey, it's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. There's no doubt that core skills like maths, and I'm extremely passionate about English as a core skill. I think the English language is dying, and it kind of kills me that's the case. But I do think beyond your core academic skills, why certain subjects can't be 10x more applied than they are to the real world that people are going to grow up and go into is a bit beyond me. And therefore probably, data comes into that somewhere, whether it is just a more applied version of maths and statistics, whatever that might look like. But I think it's a million miles away based on all the things Katie's just said. And it's a real shame, but I guess gives us a market, so probably shouldn't complain that much.
There's some exciting things about how do you entertain and engage children, and I've got two small children, and there's things like Minecraft who have programming skills. There's different ways of doing this, and they have programs for schools. I don't think it's visible in those teaching communities. I think it's very much how do they crack into that community to enable those teachers to feel confident in teaching some of this as well. They're not industry experts in this space and how it's going to be used. And often what that means is that they've got great ideas, but they've got 35 children in a class. They've got how are they being able to infuse them and engage them in different ways of learning, etc. And I just think there are some great ideas out there through startups and things that probably just don't have the visibility, and schools don't have the money to invest. So I think there are much more there's much more opportunity to bring those things together, but then that ties into the whole social enterprise part.
Yeah, I mean, you are right. We focus on the theory, essentially. That's all it is, education, without the application. And we all know that theory, you don't remember it as much unless you put it into practice. So, yeah, we need to revolutionise education, I think.
If this is just for the people listening, just like an additional area of interest for them, because they've got kids and they want to think about this, or just because education is interesting to them, there's a guy called Cameron Parker. Cam Parker runs a business called Dare to Win, spends every day of his week speaking to young people as a motivational speaker, but runs a podcast of his own, which is, I guess, designed to challenge the current constructs of the education setup, and brings in curious teachers who are thinking about how to improve it. So yeah, I think a lot of the work Cam does in his own world is really interesting if you've got an educational lens that you want to take. So yeah. Give Cam Parker a Google or a LinkedIn, because
I'll check it out. Thank you.
It's a good listen.
So before we move on to the quickfire data lightning round, Greg, I just want to end with a question. I suppose the future of the Data Literacy Academy, what does that look like to you?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to keep growing. We're really fortunate that we get to work with a series of incredible brands, and we bring multiple on a month, and that's phenomenal. And that means we can grow the team, and we get to work with fantastic people. I think, honestly, the best thing about our business is the people. And I know that sounds like such a cliche, but we aim to hire phenomenal people who our clients should want to work with. I think that's a really important thing. If you're going to pay for external support, the people better be the type of people that you'd want to hire yourself. And that's hopefully what we're bringing to the table. We continue to grow. We continue to go bigger and bigger. We're able to service much larger programs at much bigger scale now. I want us to, there's some brilliant internal programs out there that I'd love us to be able to partner with and be part of without having to be the whole program. We're increasingly signing clients in the US and in Europe, and we're about to sign one of, if not the biggest retail groups in Australia. Like the whole thing just continues to grow and scale, and we're hiring like mad at the moment. That's
world domination.
World domination's the plan. I believe that in our category, and I've tried to subset the category from just data literacy, but I honestly believe, and I'm clearly biased, don't get me wrong, but I don't believe anybody can help you build a program of data literacy and culture for your business professionals anywhere near as well as us. And that's what I want us to be the best at. I just want us to be, if you've got a wider business program that you want to run, you come to us, and you come to us because we're the best at it. And that's just what I want this business to be, I think. And we learn every day, and we keep developing, and we keep iterating, and we keep improving, and we keep releasing new things that help people. And
we need to change our t-shirts to now say data and AI.
Yeah, obviously, AI is an increase. Like, we've got AI education products now, and if people want a business lens on AI, then we can deliver that for your business people. Those things are just continuous now. It just continues to grow, scale, new products, all that type of stuff. So.
Love that. Well, you're onto a good thing by the sounds of it. Katie, what would you add to that?
I think it's about adding that value. It's about really satisfying that need as well. And what we're really clear in our mission is not to lose sight of that impact that we have, that personal approach and that partnership approach, that every client, even through the growth, means so much to us, and that relationship means so much to us. And as we scale and we grow, every learner has that support and that piece of the puzzle that means that if they're struggling with it, we can continue to offer that additional support to them. And that, for me, is the future part of it. Is it's not just about education, it's about behaviour change, it's about mindset change, it's about all the soft stuff as well, isn't it? About really making a difference for people.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to make sure that we
big picture.
On a bigger
World domination. I love that. So we'll move on to the quickfire data lightning round. So Katie, what is one myth about data that you'd like to debunk?
That it isn't for everybody. I think I used that one last time. I think you maybe asked me that one last time. It's still really important. Data isn't just for data people, or like people that think that it excludes them. It's for everybody.
Okay. Greg, name a book, podcast or event that every data enthusiast should explore.
So I'm going to go Driven by Data just because we're the lead sponsor, but and I do like Driven by Data. Sorry. But yeah, I mean, we're the lead sponsor of that podcast, so I'd recommend you listen to that just so you get to hear my voice once or twice an episode.
Katie, finish the sentence. Data is the key to
success.
Nailed it. Number 4, name a piece of advice that you'd give to someone just starting out in the world of data.
For me, it's that you will get told an awful lot that it's a technical craft, and especially early in your career, a lot of the focus will be on the hard skills and improving those. And I'm not a denier, you do need those. But the best data people, the people that get into senior roles and earn 6 figures like it's going out of fashion, are the ones who are commercially minded, great communicators, great storytellers. Like, if the earlier you can get on the bandwagon of soft skills enabling hard skills, the better off you'll be, because it isn't a place that people sit in rooms and code anymore. It's about commercial value and partnership, and I don't think that's emphasised enough early on in people's data careers.
Yeah, 100%. And Katie, last one. What is a data buzzword that you love to hate?
Data buzzword that I love to hate. The word data. I love it in so many ways, and I hate the barrier that it creates.
You're so right. I said to someone, I was in London in a taxi saying, I'm doing a podcast, let's talk data. And he actually said to me, what's data?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, wow, that is a tough question to answer. Yeah. It's true. Even the word itself.
It freezes people up. It locks people down.
Yeah, yeah.
I personally hate the phrase data lake, and I've wanted to get this into a podcast for a while. So I just think the concept of using data lake like it's a normal word that other people would understand is just obnoxious. So, like, let's be honest, it's just a really big file. Like, if we want to get like simple on it, don't try and baffle business people by talking about your fancy data lake or your cloud. Like, it's all ethereal. Like, let's just use things that people understand. So I hate the phrase data lake.
Well, that was a brilliant one. I was in a meeting yesterday, and they described their data lake as a data swamp, which I thought was brilliant. She was fully getting on board with the water element of data.
It's where things go to die.
Most people's data lake is a data swamp, to be fair to her, so I absolutely get it.
But yeah, you'd eradicate data lake then from the data dictionary.
I'd at least ensure that it was always followed with an explainer. So, like, rather than it just being dropped in like it's casual conversation, they have to, if they're going to say it to a business person, explain exactly what it means and it allows for it. Every time.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Well, thank you guys. Thank you again, Katy. And welcome, Greg.
Thank you so much.
Nailed it. Well done. Thank you.